This is WVBN from Japan. The United States and Japan formalized an agreement for mutual protection of trans-Pacific convoys. Before regular shipping would begin, Japan agreed to provide a special escort of Task Force 11 to transport a one-time delivery between the two nations, while the United States would assist Japan in clearing the remainder of the Marianas Islands. This was followed by a ceremony commemorating the Battle of Guam, with the reaffirmation of humanity's united fight against the Morgana. At the end, one reporter questioned whether Congo was transporting special dignitaries and researchers to the US in the convoy, but the Navy refused to confirm or deny. The Admiralty ordered a requisition of a trio of Nita Maru-class liners to be rebuilt into carriers dubbed the Taiyo class. While originally slated to be escort carriers that would primarily ferry aircraft around, a decision was made to invest further into the hulls to bring them to the capability of a light carrier, which could keep up with fleets of average speed as well as launch and recover aircraft on their decks. The three carriers will be named Taiyo, Unyo, and Chuyo. All three will be rebuilt as space allows. American and Japanese Marine forces prepared to begin a campaign to liberate the remainder of the Marianas Islands, beginning with one of the largest settlements, Saipan. As the two forces mingled and exchanged cultures, they soon found themselves preparing to deploy. Forces arrived on Saipan without resistance, finding evidence of earlier fights between the locals and the Morgana. While much of the island was wreckage, some Morgana traps were left for whoever was unlucky enough to stumble into them, none of which were great in scale. By the middle of the week, the island had been declared cleared, and friendly forces discovered that approximately 50% of the island's population had survived, taking shelter where they could, while the small garrison of soldiers and other capable men had bought enough time for them to escape the initial attacks. A memorial was erected on the island for those who perished, as efforts to rebuild the island slowly began. The rest of the campaign this week saw only scattered Morgana submarines in the area, all of which were efficiently dealt with by American and Japanese destroyers. When the Dutch proposed a comprehensive shipbuilding plan for Japan in order to reinforce the East Indies, Japanese authorities asked for more time before committing to an agreement, as the Dutch had been too vague in their requests. In the meantime, Kamikaze and Java worked together to prepare the designs of the Otori Kai for Dutch use, as these small ships could be built in domestic shipyards without the need for Japan. By far the biggest story out of Japan concerns the action in Tokyo Bay, still being talked about in every corner of the country. With much of the combined fleet being deployed elsewhere, the Morgana pirates which attacked Tokyo Bay months ago made a bold second attempt at causing havoc on the capital. Japan had spent that time preparing for such an attack, and this time the coastal artillery of Tokyo roared to life as Atago took a leading position in the local defensive fleet. Yamashiro lent her considerable firepower to the cause, and the blasts from her cannons shook the mountains and trees as the veteran Japanese forces began to cut down the considerable Morgana forces, knowing that allowing a strike on Tokyo or nearby Yokosuka naval base would be a crippling blow to Japan. The Morgana did not fear the Japanese and fired back, damaging Yamashiro and severely damaging Hatsukaze, nearly sinking her were it not for the actions of her sister Amatsukaze, whose captain shielded the destroyer behind a wave of torpedoes as she retreated to safety. Even as torpedoes slammed into the Morgana, more kept pouring into the bay, and the Japanese captains became alarmed that they may be outmatched. As the Morgana pushed into range of Yokosuka, Atago and her captain prepared for a desperate push, when suddenly the world stood still around them. A woman's voice echoed across the bay, clear as crystal. It condemned the Morgana for daring to return, and as stone broke and shattered apart, a bright light shone across Tokyo Bay, brighter than anyone had yet seen. Morgana sank outright as holes blew through their hulls, the wounded ones succumbing to any amount of damage dealt to them as fires and explosions ripped through the hostile fleet. The source of the light was none other than the battleship Mikasa, the most famous battleship in Japan and hero of the Battle of Tsushima. Her Kami's radiance shone in awe as workers later reported the ship breaking free of her concrete tomb, stepping down to inspect herself. She observed that she was not yet seaworthy and questioned what happened to her guns. Interviews with an eyewitness described her as, quote, "He could barely look upon the radiant Kami incarnate, such was her beauty. Her skin as bright as moonlight, eyes fierce like a wild wolf, hair as black as the void itself, pulled up in a tight bun. Her fine kimono echoed a naval officer's uniform, with her many decorations in the appropriate places on the luscious silk that would make even the kimono makers of the imperial family green with envy. Its dark colors give way to hints of the flames that race across Mount Mikasa once a year, and the green of the forests on her hills, and the many deer that shelter within her boughs. Her obi was girdled with a belt, with a buckle that gleamed with the imperial seal, a replica of her own bow. The bow at the back of her obi revealing its inner pattern to be that of the Z flag that helped make her and her former captain the heroes they are today. All crowned with a beautiful Kyoguntu, a twin of Admiral Togo's famous sword, echoing not just her past, but her origin in a faraway land from the mountain she was named for. The only odd thing that stood out to anyone observing her was a pair of ankle-length leather boots that disappeared under her robe in such a way that suggested part of her outfit was a carefully concealed hakama, ready for battle at a moment's notice, but hardly letting that get in the way of everything being exactly the way it was supposed to be for a noblewoman. It was nearly 10 minutes until anyone acted, as they were overjoyed at Mikasa finally gracing them with her presence. With the ship freed, work could begin in earnest to get her seaworthy as quickly as possible, and the Emperor sent an advance envoy bearing gifts and messages in anticipation of his arrival to meet the kami the following week. Yokosuka itself began preparing for this divine ceremony. In the aftermath of the battle, Yamashiro would undergo minor repairs while remaining combat capable, while Hatsukaze would be laid up in dry dock for 3 weeks, while her captain demanded that Amatsukaze and her captain, Haratamichi, be decorated for his actions in saving the destroyer. The submarine fleet saw little action this week, but operator error damaged I-18, who would be out of action for 3 weeks as she underwent repairs. Foreign Minister Arita Hachiro declared that all of Southeast Asia would be economically bound to Japan, and that the government would be closely watching the war in Europe for anything that could threaten regional interests. Even so, some in government advised a softening of attitudes toward the US, which some took as a sign of thawing relations between the two nations. Later in the week, a notice was received from Geneva inviting Japan to rejoin the League of Nations, an organization which they had previously left primarily over a refusal to recognize their annexation of Manchuria, but also over tensions from a refusal to adopt a racial equality clause, defeated by the United States and heavily opposed by Australia. Foreign Minister Hachiro was cautiously supportive, but felt that Japan would be better served negotiating directly with the United States and Britain. Prime Minister Yonai made no outward preference in either direction, but asked for input from various positions in the Japanese government. His only condition was that the League adopt the Racial Equality Clause, recognizing Japanese people and subjects as equal with Europeans. Finally, Tone had a stagnant week with little progress to report. This has been WVBN from Japan.